All right, so we're recording. We're going to get started. System administration here. This is, I think, the seventh week. This is week 7. All right, I've graded most of your exams. I still haven't finished like a few. Still have like 5 or so, but the majority of you should have an exam. I should be finished. I was finished yesterday, so I'll hopefully finish the next 2 days, the last few exams. And then I'll go back to grading your homework assignments. But you should have some grades, right? And we've gone over those topics. So, basically now I would say, you're familiar with Linux and know how to use it, know how to use the commands. Obviously, some of the topics are going to get a little bit more sophisticated or advanced going forward. You're going to be using 2 VMs essentially, so a little bit more networking involved. So please, if you haven't done so already, make sure you create a second VM, right? So let me start the virtual machine. Today, we're just going to play with the VM. So, a lot of Linux is security, so we're going to look at some security ideas. You need to have, so currently you guys probably just have 1 VM. You need to have 2, right? So your goal is to create a second one, which is a clone of the first one. And then get the IP addresses. So do ifconfig on both machines and then ping from one to the other. Okay, does that make sense? So I'll show you guys. I can probably start up these 2 VMs today and just show you what I mean. They need to be on a NAT network. So this is so that we can start doing labs, such as the DNS lab, which is coming up. Today, we're still just using one virtual. Oh, yeah, sorry. Is it a CVM? Yeah, that's fine. If you have 2 already, and in particular, if they need to have like their own serial number, so it's like a MAC address, so that they're different, and then if you can ping from one to the other, so different IPs. So sometimes with VirtualBox, they share the same IP address, so that's not going to work, if that makes sense. So I'll show you guys actually today in a second. All right. So yeah, so let me. All right. Let's go to the table of contents. So last week, you guys were working on the account management lab. That was a very easy one. So you could work on that one on your own. Homework has been assigned there. And that's a very, typical or classic topic to discuss in a system administration course. So account management, basically, groups, all the, creating the accounts, and you're using some automation, of course, to create the accounts. Okay. In this second third of the semester, we start looking at slightly more complex topics, in particular these 3: DNS, Hadoop, and SNMP, all of which kind of involve at least 2 VMs, but it could be 10, 20 VMs, hundreds of machines. But you start to think about how you can use Linux to develop more complex things. So for instance, Hadoop goes into this idea of creating a cluster of computers to use for whatever reason. So that's one of the topics that's coming up. It's a more advanced topic. DNS, of course, as I said, we're also going to start doing the Wireshark reading assignments. And then SNMP, which is a traditional protocol for monitoring of computer systems. So we will explore these 3 topics. All right, today we're going to explore, or this week, host-based firewalls. So as you can see, so I'll talk about Linux and the firewall there. So the firewall for Linux is called IP tables. But there's an interface to it called UFW, which stands for uncomplicated firewall. But it's really just an interface to the actual underlying firewall, which is IP tables, which I will discuss a little bit as well. It's very interesting how that works. It's very important and powerful. And what's great about Linux is that you can then customize things and you can actually build on top of those ideas. Okay, so we'll cover that. All right, so so this is the topic. Let me start the 2 VMs. since we will be using them. Let's do that. All right, so let's click on host-based firewall, the module. So as you can see, there is a managerial system administration set of slides. So remember, go through those and read through them. I do have a set of firewall, technical firewall slides. And of course, there's going to be the document, IP tables, and so on. So all the ideas that we're going to discuss. Okay. So it's a lot of reading materials, but I will create the lab. It'll be based mainly probably around this one here. Okay. So, and we're just going to be using the UFW firewall today. So we're just going to go through this document. Later on, we're going to discuss IP tables and how that works, and everything. You can, in fact, for instance, you could take something like a Raspberry Pi, and Raspberry Pis have one network interface, but you can convert one of the USB ports to another network interface. A Raspberry Pi uses something called Raspbian, which is a Linux version for a Raspberry. So you can essentially use the IP tables firewall on a Raspberry to create your own router, right? Or your own firewall and play with it and customize it and things like that. So it's super versatile in what you can do. But I'll show you guys those ideas later on Wednesday. All right, so yeah, so this is one VM. Start the other one. All right, so this is one of the virtual machines. Okay. So we want to do ifconfig. Oops. All right, and we look at, it'll have these interfaces, Docker. So Docker is a topic we'll cover later in the semester, but essentially the network interface that we want to look at is ENP 0S3, and you can see that the IP address for it is 10.0.2.4, which is really the important thing. The net subnet mask 255, 255, 255, 0. All right, so we'll wait for the other virtual machine to start up. Okay. All right. Let's start this one. You can see this is a different virtual machine, just one account. Pardon? The terminal. We're just checking the IPs, like network connectivity. That's the key thing. So when you do this, when you create your clone or your duplicate of the VM, you have to make sure that they have different IP addresses and that you can ping from one to the other. Okay, that's kind of like, that's how you know that that you're ready for the labs. Okay, if you don't do that and you start doing the labs, if you don't have that functionality, it's just not going to work. So you got to get that done. All right, so let's take a look here. So this is one computer and it's 10.0.2.4. Okay. So then I need to have the other one. So I'm also going to open the terminal for this one. Okay, I'm going to do ifconfig. And if you notice over here, it's got a network interface, ENP0S3, the same one, but the IP address is different. So this one is 10.02.15. Does that make sense, guys? So that's the key thing. So now from one VM, you want to ping into the other. So 10.0.2, 10.0.24, I think it was. They need to be on the same network. So is it the 10.0.2 network? Let's check. Yeah, so it's a 10.0.2 network. So this is the network ID, and then each one has their own, right? So 10.0.24 and 10.0.2.15. So I'm going to go ahead and ping 10.0.24, and you can see 64 bytes. I can actually ping it. You guys see that? So this is what you need to be able to do. So now I'm going to go to the other machine. All right, so now I'm here. I'm going to ping 10.0.2.15, I think it was. And you can see I can ping. So essentially, that's what you need. Okay? Any questions? Right. All right. So this is kind of, on you guys to ensure you have these VMs. Another thing I'm going to do is I'm going to show you, for instance, that I can SSH from one to the other. Obviously, the services need to be enabled. Now, going forward, like I said, 3 labs or so that we're going to do coming up, which are, a bit longer labs. One is we're going to build these client server architectures. So one of the machine is always the client. One of them is going to be always the server. We're just going to designate which one it is. So in this case, I'm going to SSH into one, for instance. So this is, again, ifconfig 10.0.24, right? So I'm going to SSH into 10.0.2.15. Okay, so you can see it's taking its time, right? So it's not liking it. What does that probably mean? It means that the SSH service is not on, the port is not open. Obviously, this starts to get into this idea of firewalls, right? Also, the firewall is blocking any traffic that comes from the outside, unless a service opens up a port. Does that make sense? So pretty straightforward things that you guys have explored before. So this doesn't seem to have worked. So let me go over to the other machine. So this, pardon? You have the same IP in both, right? So that's a problem. So you cloned it. Yeah, if you remember at the beginning of the semester, right? I gave you guys this .exe program. And then, do you remember that? Okay, you have to do that because, yeah. So do you guys want me to repeat that? So at the beginning of the semester, we discussed this, that if you had a machine already, and then if you kind of created a new machine, you would have a clash, right? A conflict of machines. So you have to go to the original file, you have to run that .exe program, and it changes the MAC address for that machine. Then when you create a clone of it, then you should have 2 machines. Do you guys understand that? And I gave you the link. That's probably all in the GitHub, because these are questions that come up every year. So I have my own like frequently asked questions. So if we go to system administration, here, Unix and Python scripting, I should have in here CVM errors, UUID error, right? And these were the commands that we discussed. Does that make sense, guys? How many of you have gotten the 2 VMs set up already? Any questions? This is not, you can do this now while I'm lecturing if you'd like. But yeah, that's what you should do, right? Does that make sense? Go to here are the instructions. So the universally unique identifier, UUID, is a string of characters used to identify a specific virtual disk. The UUID of a virtual disk can be changed for various reasons, such as to avoid duplication or to keep the virtual disk separate from others with the same name, similar to like a MAC address. So you go to the place where, the file is, and then you run this .exe program. So this command is on Windows or Mac, and then create the VM. Got it? All right, perfect. So please work on that, right? And then I'll just keep going, all right? Okay, so yeah, so right now I'm just demoing kind of like the functionality between two virtual machines. We haven't even started the lab yet, but this is important that we get this going. So I was talking about SSH. So all I'm trying to do right now is have connectivity between the two VMs. So I tried SSHing into 10.02.15. So I'm going to do, what is it? C at, right? To directly connect into that account. Could not resolve host name 10.02.15. Okay, networking problem. Let's ping it again. Oh, okay. Pinged. Did it close? What happened there? 10.02.15. Okay. See, now it's saying unreachable. That's interesting. I lost the IP actually, if you notice. Do you guys see that? All right, so usually when this happens, it's a network issue. Here it is, network. Network settings. So usually it's somewhere here. So there's this NAT network. I am in NAT network. You can change it to NAT and play with these interfaces. See if that gives me an IP address. Oh, there it is. So I do have a 10.024 now. Okay, so reachable. But I do have an IP. So let me look at the other virtual machine. This one does have an IP, but it's unreachable. What's that? Yeah, they need to be on the same network. That's what I'll do in a sec.